got it, Christine. Here we go. It is the fifth and final hour of the South Shore's Morning News, coming to you from Broadcast House here in Marshfield. The music means it's Feel Good Friday. Normally, Mark Stiles would be here from Stiles Law on Route 139 in Marshfield. He is off this week and substituting, filling in. Got Dr. Joe from the Dr. Joe Show on WATD Thursday nights, Dr. Joe Shrand. Good morning, Dr. Joe.
Good morning, Rob. It is so nice to be here. And Christine, I know you're hanging around someplace. I do hope you get to the beach.
We hope so, right? Oh, Christine?
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's coming from Dr. Sand.
Dr. Sand.
Sorry, I couldn't resist that. Sorry, it's a Shrand joke.
You like
that?
that?
Though.
Yeah. So, yeah, here I am. It's great. Mark is having a great time. I hope that he's relaxing. He works so hard. He does so much for the community. You know,
he's been busy. Yeah, he's been cycling a lot as of late.
Yeah, and he certainly has. And the cycling part has helped so many people. You know, we talk about that it's not a race, right? Mm-hmm. But it really is. It's a race against cancer.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing. So really appreciate all that he's done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The Pan Mass Challenge, great turnout in their race. They've raised a lot of money over the years, so that is a good thing. Yeah. We've got a lot of things to get into with Dr. Joe. Of course, you can hear him Thursday nights. His full show is Thursday nights, 8 to 9 on WATD. And you have some very good news you wanted to share, right?
I do indeed, and I want to thank Senator Moran and Senator Connor, a whole bunch of people. Drug Story Theater, I don't know if you guys remember, Drug Story Theater is our nonprofit. Mm-hmm. We got a lovely bit of money from the state to build out our program over this year, and that's part of why I'm here, is to let people know that Drug Story Theater is back. We never went away. We were here all through COVID, and we got a lot of support from District Attorney Cruz and District Attorney Early to get our shows out. But right now, we are asking for people to think about being part of our team. Okay. So we're looking for more kids. Yeah. And we're looking for kids who are not just, struggling with substance use with drugs and alcohol, and they are out there. But there's this new thing, maybe not that new, but screen time addiction.
Screen time addiction?
Like internet addiction.
Yeah.
Or your cell phone addiction, or looking at your iPad, where people are spending so much time looking at something other than another human being.
Yes.
And how is that influencing their world, the world around them, their parents, their schools? So that's going to be a part of it, but we're still actively looking for kids who can help us out and who are ready to help other people. One of the things we talk about is contribute to society to help with your sobriety. And I think it's really hard for people to start conceptualizing internet addiction as something that you need to take time away from, that you need to find some way to be sober from it, because we just don't think of it that way.
Yeah. Do you think there are people that will say, well, Dr. Joe, come on, it's not alcohol, it's not, it's not oxy, this is just the internet, and, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I think that there will be many people like that who've said the same thing about drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
They said the same thing about marijuana. They said the same thing about alcohol. Remember, it was the opioid crisis that really got people's attention, that, whoa, something is going on here. Yeah. And it is that opioid crisis money settlement that is now able to fund all these treatment and prevention plans. But the thing is, we have a lot for treatment, but very little for prevention. How do we actually help someone not go down that path? And that's where our Drug Story Theater kids come in. Drug
Story Theater. Christine, did you have a question?
No, I didn't have a question. I was just going to say, it's interesting that you mentioned that about the phones, Dr. Joe Shrand, because I was at Roach Brothers this week, and I was just going through the line very quickly, and there was a young cashier there, I guess 16 or 17 years old, and this was the first. In between ringing up my order at the line, the young man was on his cell phone while he was ringing up my order at the grocery store. And then when the bagger was bagging, he had it down on the conveyor belt and was looking at it and putting in stuff. And I didn't want to sound... Yeah, while I was... And I didn't want to be, the crabby old reporter. And I just said, what
did you say?
I said, you really like that cell phone, don't you?
Mm.
So, yeah, and it didn't even occur to him that, like, this is completely unacceptable during a business transaction. And he looked so young, and I And you've heard these stories a million times. You go out to dinner, you see a whole family on cell phones, but not talking to each other. You see kids on the beach, although not this year because I haven't been to the beach. But you see people walking in a beautiful spot, and they're all on their phones.
Yes.
I call it an electronic binky.
Oh, that's a very nice way of putting
electronic binky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but I am concerned, I guess, and I'm not saying that even as adults we aren't also... we've learned certain behaviors. This technology has been something that I've gotten as an adult. But how does it affect? Because you talk about the early, the brain. You do that a lot when I've heard you on the show when you talk about alcohol and drugs and how that impacts. What is the long-term effect of this on brains as a developing brain? Do we know?
Well, we're starting to find out, and that's the thing. So the same way, Christine, your example is excellent, and all of those examples, because what's happening in our society is we're becoming insulated from the other person, even if we're sitting right next to them. That really, I think, is a prescription for difficulty in the way we manage conflict with each other, relationships with each other. It gets into the difference between happiness and pleasure. Mm-hmm. So all drugs and alcohol, and now we think screen time as well, is pleasurable. It wouldn't be addictive if you didn't get some pleasure from it.
Okay.
Right?
I think that's the
approaching storm.
That was so cool.
Wreaking havoc with the electricity.
Whoa.
Hopefully the generator is all ready this time.
And that was shocking.
Yeah. Oh.
Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. I just want to keep current with that.
Yeah.
That was revolting. Okay. A few extra dings there, I think. But thank you. So here's what's going on in the brain. These drugs and alcohol, and we think screen time, create a chemical called dopamine. Mm-hmm. Dopamine is about pleasure. Dopamine interferes, however, with oxytocin, not OxyContin, oxytocin, which is about social connection and trust. Mm-hmm. When you can't get enough of the drug or alcohol, or now we think screen time, what happens? You begin to feel stress because you need to have that pleasure. When you feel stress, you increase a chemical called cortisol, and cortisol now interferes with all sorts of things, including oxytocin, including serotonin, which is about happiness. Mm-hmm. So there is a difference between pleasure and happiness. Pleasure, it's transient. It doesn't last very long. You need more and more of it. But happiness, it's like being content. It's like saying, I like this. I like being with this person. It gives me that sense of being connected. Mm. So with kids, what we think may be happening is that as there's more disconnection from the actual person, and now it's basically this electronic person, this social internet, which, the way I think of it is it's actually antisocial because it's not social. You're with other people at a distance. You don't make eye contact. You can't read their expression. Think how many misinterpretations there are of text messages.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yes. We've done stories about people driving to other people's homes they don't know and getting in fights with them over that.
That's right.
Snapchat spats.
Yeah, that's it. So
fights.
That's it. They're fighting. And part of that is because of the stress that we have. And if you really think about it, what's been going on in our world? Our world is under this enormous stress condition where it's all cortisol. Cortisol is interfering with pleasure. Very difficult to feel pleasure when you're under stress. So more people want more dopamine. Mm-hmm. So they get more addicted. It's also very difficult to trust anyone when you're under stress.
Yeah.
And that's why we have some of the conflicts we have. But drug-free theater, we take teenagers in the early stages of their recovery. We teach them improvisational theater. They use psychodrama. They create scripted shows about the seduction of, addiction to, and recovery from drugs and alcohol. And then they perform them for middle schools and high schools, so the treatment of one becomes a prevention of many. But in between each scene of the show, the kids step out of character and they do these PowerPoint presentations teaching the audience about the neuroscience of adolescent brain development.
Wow.
This is fascinating.
No, it really is. So it's you'll be talking about drugs and alcohol and all the issues that are out there, and now you're going to add the electronic component.
Yep.
And have people talking about that and what's the the school, they talk about vaping, right?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
something, again, is all of us as adults, this is something we didn't, this is all uncharted territory.
Yeah, especially, the electronic stuff. But the kids in the audience take a pre-show and post-show neuroscience quiz, and we're measuring how kids who learn about their brain change their perception. All the programs that try to scare you, they just don't work.
You talked about that in your show the other night.
Yeah.
I was listening to that. You said, because of the fright reaction doesn't seem to have the impact. Is that can you explain it again to me? You were saying that.
Sure. I mean,
if I try to scare you, it doesn't always.
Right. If you're going to choose between fear and pleasure, between anger and pleasure, between sadness and pleasure, you're going to choose pleasure every time.
Yeah.
But because it interferes with oxytocin, which is the neurohormone of trust, you can get high, but the price you pay is trust. You just decide which is more important to you.
Wow. Drug Story Theater, so the grant is there, so we're going to have shows. There'll be more coming to this area?
Absolutely. More here, more throughout the Commonwealth. We're trying to build this ideally through some of our community behavioral health centers that we've spoken about before. But you can get in touch with us, www.drugstorytheater.org, www.drugstorytheater.org, and that's theater with an ER, because so many of our kids wind up there.
Wow. You get that? I think that impacts us, and we certainly remember that. Drugstorytheater.org.
Yes.
And we will be seeing some of those shows, and they're very powerful, and we know that we want those to happen at our schools, so that'll be good to see. And I guess it will be interesting I'm curious about all the electronic stuff. As I said, I've seen kids that will do anything to make sure that they can get more YouTube time. It seems like I know my own nephew and niece, they get excited about having the cell phones or the iPads, and they want to all have them now all the time. I mean, they set limits, but they really look forward to having that so much.
Right, and think about that. When you don't get something that gives you pleasure and you think you're not going to get it, you're going to get stressed. And then you're going to have these anger outbursts. So we do know some of that we know that kids who have internet addiction have much more difficulty managing their emotions.
Can I just add one more thing? And this is just something I've observed.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of these kids getting involved at younger and younger ages, too, with social media. And the fact that by the time when they're getting involved with it, they haven't had, I'm going to say, years like we did as kids, outside, playing with kids, learning to negotiate relationships or deal with some stressful situations at a lower level. When they get into the social media stuff and so much of it seems to go right to the nuclear option, how do they deal with that? That's what I see kids getting freaked out about. They're put into a situation where it's so far above their pay grade when it comes to something that they've dealt with, and it operates at this very high, crazy, stressful level.
Yeah.
It's just nuts.
No.
And that's why I think it's anti-social media.
I agree.
Anti-social
That's why I call it
media.
an electronic binky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. If it gets to that option, those are not the children I want to grow up to adults that are in charge of watching the button, because we don't want it to get... No, but I'm just saying, it's the same thing. And, well, maybe, Dr. Joe, let me just ask you quickly, too, on this, because it seems fascinating to me, too. You talked about being antisocial and then not looking and interacting. Do you feel that also could affect empathy?
Absolutely, it can affect empathy.
So we could have a future generation of less empathetic people.
Yes, because they're not connected. And that's what oxytocin is, right? So oxytocin is that neurohormone of trust. With trust, respect leads to value leads to trust. That is empathy, where I can say, how are you feeling? What's going on with you?
Yeah.
Without worrying that somehow you're going to misinterpret what I'm saying. If you say, how are you doing? What's going on with you in a text? People can somehow think you're dissing them.
Yeah. It's a lot of mixed messages. I
don't get all the interpretations.
Yeah.
Right.
Some people saying thumbs up is aggressive now. I don't get that either. Sorry.
I think it's time for the beach, Christine.
Me too.
And that's where we